Guess what, Rosalie? My family's coming over and you're in charge of hosting them at this fancy restaurant. Can you handle that? Oh, and by the way, do you know how to manage money? You didn't save anything, did you? Rosalie was puzzled. What do you mean? What's mine is yours. So, this restaurant you own. It's mine too. Everything's free. That sounded crazy to Rosalie. Her husband Kyle seemed clueless, thinking he could just invite the family over and not pay. Something wasn't right. Plus, he didn't seem to get it. He was about to land himself in trouble. Kyle, we can't give everything away for free. But don't worry about the money. I know you don't have savings, and I knew you were inviting the family today. So, I already arranged for someone else to pay in advance. Stop lying. I never mentioned inviting the family, and none of them said anything about being billed. My husband insisted, gesturing toward our relatives. His parents, his brother, his wife, and a few others were chatting with a waitress nearby. He smirked and made fun of them while I struggled not to burst out laughing, my lips twitching. I've been getting ready for this day. I'll do my best to entertain them just like you want, I replied, smiling to myself as I listened to him. Our in-laws approached. Hi, Rosalie. We're here to visit today. What a lovely place this is. Everyone seems to be having a great time, they said warmly, their demeanor a sharp contrast to my husband's. Mom, Dad, thanks for coming. Rosalie's happy you're here. Today's on me, my husband said casually, even though he planned to eat for free. He lied effortlessly, not just to his parents, but probably to his brother and other relatives too. He's lied before, but he's so confident he won't get caught because everyone sees him as the perfect son. Rosalie's really been excelling. She took over the restaurant from her late parents and has been running it impressively. It wasn't easy at first, but she turned things around. She's my pride and joy, he boasted to his parents, deliberately praising me, his pride and joy, to deceive them. But in reality, he barely sees me as more than a maid. As he spoke, my in-laws turned to me, nodding in approval. They've always recognized my efforts since the beginning of our marriage. Their kindness shone through their eyes. Meanwhile, my husband subtly changed his expression, silently warning me to keep quiet. Rosalie's been working hard, and Kyle's doing well too. Everything's going smoothly at Brown Trading, right? Your salary's been increasing, hasn't it? They asked. Yeah, that's correct. I'm respected at Brown Trading, and my boss has high hopes for me. I aim to lead my team through actions and results, and I'll keep up the good work, my husband replied confidently. That's our son, all right. Spending $155,000 like that isn't something just anyone can do, his parents remarked proudly, but my husband's expression darkened slightly at that moment. Today, we have 15 relatives dining with us, including my in-laws and brother-in-law's family. It's $11,000 per person, totaling $115,000. I calculated silently, knowing my husband was trying to get it all for free, unaware of the cost. When he realized it was pricier than he thought, he quickly regained composure to avoid exposing his lie. This one's on me, everyone. It's the least I can do. I just got my bonus, so no worries at all. Leave it to me, he declared, puffing up his chest as the in-laws chuckled softly. Checking the time, it was 6:00 p.m., so I guided my husband and in-laws to their reserved seats. The other relatives followed suit. Just as they were settling in, my husband shot me a creepy grin. An hour later, I approached their table in the banquet room. They were enjoying themselves, oblivious to the surroundings. Feel free to order more, everyone. It boosts restaurant sales, and Rosalie will be delighted, so go ahead, my husband encouraged, each word accompanied by a flurry of extra orders. With the banquet meals and additional orders, the bill had surpassed $20,000. Everyone assumed my husband, a corporate elite with a hefty income, was treating them. While some hesitated, my husband seemed to push them to order more. That's when I decided to set the record straight, loud enough for all to hear. Since it's Kyle's treat, I had $60,000 transferred yesterday, so everyone, please enjoy yourselves without holding back, I announced, causing a buzz of surprise among the relatives. $60,000. Classic Kyle, were words of almost admiration that flew around. While the relatives reacted like this, my husband wore a bewildered look, clueless about what was going on. I didn't miss his expression and added a line to start my counterattack. Well, the $60,000 isn't for the food. It's for alimony, actually, I stated, causing puzzled looks among the buzzing relatives. Alimony, Kyle? What's this about alimony? One of them asked. No, I don't know about any alimony. Sometimes Rosalie jokes around, so please don't mind her. Come on, Rosalie, don't upset everyone with jokes like that. My husband tried to brush it off, but he was clearly the most troubled. His face was smiling, but his eyes told a different story. The way he looked at me was terrifying. But it wasn't done. Kyle, you're the one making uncomfortable jokes here. I think it's time the family knew that, right? I said firmly, handing him a piece of paper and a bank book. As he examined them closely, his face turned pale. The alimony is for cheating. Kyle has been unfaithful. He's not the person you all think he is. He can lie and deceive people without a second thought, I revealed. The atmosphere in the banquet room shifted abruptly. The once lively chatter ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. The document I handed to my husband was the original alimony claim, and the bank book showed a record of a $60,000 transfer. Everyone's attention was fixed on my husband and me, and silence lingered for a few seconds. But it was my husband who broke it. How funny, Rosalie. That's quite something. It looks just like a real statement in a bank book, but really, this is going too far. There's no way I would cheat. It seemed like he had shifted back to his usual confident demeanor, but that confidence quickly faded, and I couldn't help but smile. What are you talking about, Kyle? You're the one who's gone too far. Not only cheating, but also trying to bully me into eating for free, lying to all the relatives that it's your treat. That's too much of a joke. Correct yourself quickly, everyone. Don't take Rosalie's words to heart. Without needing to say anything, the relatives seemed unable to believe it outright, and no one spoke up. I didn't react to my husband's words either, just watching his actions closely. Gradually, he started to panic. That's when he tried to get his parents on his side. Dad, Mom, tell her to stop these senseless jokes at a time like this. Yes, everyone calm down and listen to me, his dad began. Rosalie isn't making any senseless jokes. She's just stating the facts. It's undeniable that Kyle has been unfaithful, and she's not threatening Rosie. He's trying to get today's meal for free too. What are you two even saying? Are you taking what Rosie said seriously? That's not funny at all, my husband protested, but his parents seemed convinced. The only thing that's not funny is this situation. We've come here knowing everything to confront you, I declared. Yes, I had already confessed everything to my in-laws, revealing how my husband uses his outward kindness to play the dutiful son while behind the scenes he's up to no good. Even as we waited for our reservation time, he tried to deceive his parents, but they saw through his lies. Enough. I would never deceive everyone. You're ruining the good mood we had, Rosalie. What are you going to do about this? My disclosure and having the in-laws on my side were completely unexpected for him. He visibly started to lose his composure, standing up and glaring at me intensely, as if he might lunge at me any moment. Come on, brother, calm down. Let's sit down and talk this over calmly. Nicholas, you believe me, right? Interjected his brother, my brother-in-law Nicholas, cutting through my husband's angry shouts. Nicholas, busy with his own job, was attending today with his wife Yasmin. I knew Nicholas and my husband had been close since before I started dating him, and he is as gentle and consistently smiling as the in-laws. However, Nicholas's next action would utterly defeat my husband. He pulled a thick envelope out of his bag and handed it to my husband, saying, "You believe me, right, brother?" "How can I believe you when you've been cheating with my wife, Nicholas?" "You what?" My husband's accusation hung heavy in the air as Nicholas handed over the envelope. Inside was a report on the infidelity investigation. It turns out my husband had been cheating with Nicholas's wife, Yasmin. Just before my father-in-law had said, "We've come here knowing everything," and by we, he meant the brother-in-law's family too. And it turns out, I learned about my husband's infidelity thanks to Nicholas. Hesitantly, my husband checked the contents of the envelope, turning pale as a ghost. Inside were numerous photos of him cheating with Yasmin, pictures of them dining at a fancy restaurant, looking into each other's eyes. There were photos of them being cozy in a car and others of them embracing and kissing in front of a hotel. There's no way he could just say they were just going out. It was indeed a decisive moment, a hellish scene. "Is this a joke? Unbelievable, Kyle did this," were the whispers I heard. The relatives around us were in turmoil, and the banquet hall buzzed in a whole different way. For my husband, it couldn't have gotten any worse. He was completely flustered now. No, wait. This investigation report is fake. The photos must be doctored because I haven't cheated with Yasmin. We didn't cheat, right? He pleaded, trying to enlist Yasmin's support in his last-ditch effort. Immediately after Yasmin, now the center of attention, bowed deeply to the floor in full prostration. "Everyone, I am terribly sorry. I have had an affair with Kyle." Yasmin's confession stunned the room. My husband in particular was visibly shaken. He hadn't anticipated Yasmin fully admitting to the affair. He had been insisting the alimony bill and the bank book were fake, only thinking of himself and taking me for granted. He couldn't have imagined this. Yasmin's earnest apology captivated not only my husband but also the rest of the banquet hall. But it wasn't just my husband who was affected. All the relatives were stunned by Yasmin's admission. As her forehead remained on the floor, she slowly began to speak. "It really was just a fling. Nicholas is a wonderful husband, but, well, it lacked excitement, you might say. Just doing housework and waiting at home for Nicholas to return, I started to feel like my life would forever be the same. And suddenly, I got bored. When I approached Kyle, he was happy to go along." Everyone listened in silence to Yasmin's voice, mixed with regret and reflection. As she raised her head and revealed more truths, I tried to end it immediately, knowing it was wrong. But Kyle got serious about it. He threatened to expose everything if I tried to break it off. I know it sounds like an excuse now, but I am truly sorry. Yasmin's confession left the relatives staring in disbelief at such a lack of morals. Yasmin had initiated the affair, and though she was threatened, it's hard to completely sympathize with her. But she came here today to admit her mistakes and apologize, which is somewhat redeemable. However, my husband tried to escape by lying and making excuses, unaware that he was just tightening the noose around his own neck. He really is a fool, brother. It's all useless. I, Rosalie, and our parents know everything. I'm going to demand alimony from you, and you're going to pay Nicholas. When did you realize? You didn't even do an investigation. You must have been sure, right? Yes, I heard it from someone I truly despise, you brother. Right, Rosalie? That's right. It wasn't just Yasmin. He had his hands on other women too. What, Rosalie? How much do you know? Just give me a break already. Too bad, Kyle. I know everything, and if anyone should be asking for mercy, it's us. I never thought you'd even make a move on an employee at a restaurant. I continued, then called the woman into the banquet hall. This woman was the waitress who had been talking with the in-laws, Nicholas, Yasmin, and several other relatives while they waited for their reservation time. Turns out, while having an affair with Yasmin, my husband had also been making advances towards this waitress. She had also attended the same school with me back in our student days. Before even consulting Rosalie, who was the restaurant owner, she came to me. Kyle had threatened to destroy your family if you spilled the beans to Rosalie. You're really horrible. I've said it before, but we know everything, brother. All you can do now is admit your guilt and apologize, just like Yasmin did. Kyle, let me ask you something. Why would you deceive Rosalie to carry on with your affairs? From what we can see, Rosalie has been nothing but supportive. She's been managing the restaurant that she inherited from her parents and taking care of home as well. What does she ever do to you? Under the cold stares, my husband flinched at his father-in-law's question. I thought there was no valid excuse for infidelity, but if I had been unconsciously pushing him into a corner, I wanted to reflect on myself too. Awaiting his response, what he said next was shocking. I married Rosalie because I felt sorry for her. Before our marriage, she was struggling to turn the restaurant around with both parents gone. I was the only one she could rely on. I couldn't live without that feeling of superiority. And then what? Rosalie managed to turn it around. The restaurant became popular, and suddenly I found it boring. That's why I thought of dumping her, my husband said, smirking as if he had nothing to lose. Despite already knowing his true nature, a deep disgust welled up from within. It seemed he viewed everyone but himself as mere tools. The cold stares from the relatives quickly turned to pity. A feeling of superiority felt good, got bored, and decided to dump her. Kyle, do you realize what you're saying? You're successful in your big company because Rosalie supported you. Don't you have any gratitude? No, you're wrong. I succeeded because of my own skills. Besides, isn't it normal for a wife to support her husband? Does a mother serve a father expecting gratitude? No, right? Rosalie served me because she loved me. It's presumptuous to expect gratitude for that, my husband argued. Enough, Kyle. I find you repulsive. We are cutting ties with you, but we will watch you until you take responsibility. Be prepared. Fine, cut ties or whatever. I have a stable job. I can live on my own. In fact, it's a relief, right, Rosalie? You can enjoy life more without me around. I'll pay whatever alimony or anything else, so don't worry." My husband laughed, seemingly without a care. Looking at him, I thought again, he doesn't understand anything, knows nothing at all. "Really? You can pay alimony? Aren't you about to be sued by your company, Kyle? A lawsuit for damages isn't cheap, you know," I retorted. "What? The company's suing me? That's ridiculous. You were bragging today, weren't you, that you're respected at Brown Trading, that your boss has high expectations, that you lead your subordinates with actions and results. But it was all lies. In reality, you've been threatening your subordinates and embezzling company money." "What? I would never do something like that. I rose through the ranks on my own merit." "Don't talk nonsense when you know nothing," my husband protested. "What you don't know, Kyle, is that all the subordinates you threatened have come forward. The company has been aware of the issue for a while. But you don't have to believe me, I'm just stating facts. It'll be interesting to see how far you fall," I explained to him in a calm tone, trying to make him understand. And the color drained from his face. If he really had no idea, he could have laughed it off. But the truth is, he was misbehaving at work too, so denying it was impossible. Seeing the realization dawn on him, he quickly turned, pleading, "Rosalie, you're right. I knew nothing. I'd only said those things because I wanted to leave. Please continue to support me if we divorce now." I stopped him right there. "Don't say anything more. The relatives are about to tear you apart, Kyle. It's too late for anything now, and it doesn't matter whether you knew or didn't know. No one will help you, and you'll get your wish to live alone. Oh, and by the way, make sure you pay for today's bill. It was your treat, wasn't it?" The moment I said this, Kyle collapsed to his knees. No one reached out to help him. Today, after threatening me, deceiving the relatives to get a free meal, he finds himself unable to get off scot-free. Afterwards, I filed for divorce, and Kyle was sued by his company. Kyle ended up incurring a significant amount of debt. The reason Kyle had no savings despite dealing with Brown Trading was that he was footing the bill for entertainment expenses with the employees. However, this entertainment was merely a pretext. In reality, Kyle was just squandering money at nightclubs. Given that Kyle, who had a high-paying job, had no savings, it's clear he had been recklessly spending his money. This was entirely Kyle's own doing, so he should have dealt with it himself. But instead, he asked for help from his in-laws and Nicholas's family. Of course, no one was willing to help. Kyle had defiantly claimed he could live on his own and even laughed off being disowned. So it's no surprise, yet Kyle continued his futile attempts and kept sending messages to my smartphone incessantly. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have cheated. I regret it. Please help me." The messages clearly showed he was desperate, but it felt like just another act, given his history of deceit and manipulation. It's hard to believe him still. I have not blocked Kyle's contact. I've left it unblocked so that I can receive his messages. I want to see what becomes of a person who has only thought of himself and demeaned others around him. It's uncertain what will happen to Kyle now that he has hit rock bottom. One thing I do know is that unless Kyle truly repents and changes himself, he will not be able to climb out of this pit. That much I am sure of. "Rosalie, I am truly sorry for what my brother has done. It's irreparable." Nicholas apologized to me after divorcing Yasmin. The in-laws who came with him also deeply bowed their heads. "I am a failure as a parent. I can't believe I didn't see my son's true nature sooner. If only I had realized earlier, this wouldn't have happened. Kyle took advantage of your kindness, Rosalie, and did whatever he wanted. It was our responsibility to stop him. You all don't need to apologize. If anything, I am grateful. I had no one else to rely on, no parents or relatives. So thank you for always being on my side. From the beginning of our marriage, the in-laws and Nicholas have been my allies. That I was able to turn around the inherited restaurant was possible only with their support. They are genuinely kind and always smiling. They showed such fury on my behalf that was incredibly comforting to me, who is utterly alone. I will never forget this warmth for as long as I live." My heart sank as my mother-in-law brandished a knife, her words slicing through me like blades. "You not only demand our son to handle household chores and childcare, but now you're also after our finances. Get out of this house, you lazy freeloader. You barely bring in $700. A chill ran down my spine as I stood there, sweat beading on my forehead. Despite pouring all my energy into managing the household and looking after the children in lieu of my unemployed husband, I found myself confronted with accusations and hostility. It was a crushing moment. a culmination of frustration and despair. I knew then that I had reached my breaking point. I left the chores unfinished, scooped up my child, and made a beeline for my parents' house. I'm Emily, 23 years old, residing with my husband, our little one, and my mother-in-law. My mind wandered back to the beginning. Richard, my high school's golden boy, a star on the soccer field and beloved student president. His return to our small town after landing a job was met with adoration from everyone. When he approached me, I was taken aback. After a few dates, we dove into a serious relationship. Even now, as adults, he remained my handsome, envy-inducing boyfriend. After graduating from vocational school, I discovered I was pregnant. It wasn't the typical order of events, but I held onto the belief that I could still carve out a happy life with my child and Richard. Our home echoed with discussions about our future post-marriage. How about moving into my parents' place after we tie the knot? Richard suggested. Why? I envisioned just the three of us, our child included, I countered. But won't that be expensive? If we stay with my parents, money won't be a constant worry. With both of us working, we could afford our own place, couldn't we? Well, about that, my income this month is pretty dismal. How bad? I pressed. Less than $1,000. What? How is that possible? I thought you were working at an IT company. I quit. Now I'm trying my luck at the casino and picking up part-time gigs. The casino? Why would you do that? My disbelief hung heavy in the air. It turned out he had quit his job after only a month. If you're okay handling all the expenses, I'm fine with getting an apartment, he stated matter-of-factly. His detached demeanor left me feeling uneasy, questioning if I was the only one truly invested in our fresh start together. Sensing my apprehension, he grasped both of my hands firmly. It's just temporary until I secure another job. I'll make you happy, Emily. I'll take care of all the household chores and child rearing until then. Trusting in his assurances, we exchanged vows. Our journey together began in his parents' home. Following a safe delivery, I pledged to give my all for my son. Both Richard and my mother-in-law appeared content, and I eagerly anticipated our shared journey ahead. However, even after our son was born, Richard neglected his responsibilities, opting to spend his days at the casino. After the casino again, what about helping with the household chores and caring for our child? I confronted him about his broken promise. Don't you dare tell me what to do. Richard's sudden outburst caught me off guard. Perplexed by the sudden tension, my mother-in-law intervened, drawn by the commotion. What's all this noise? It's just that I'm overwhelmed with work, and she's asking for assistance with chores and childcare, I explained. What? That's a wife's duty. My mother-in-law's response left me stunned. Richard hadn't informed his mother about quitting his job. Instead, he painted me as an unreasonable wife, burdening him with household chores and childcare. Initially, my mother-in-law, who had been kind, grew to resent me after buying into Richard's narrative. Despite his sporadic part-time work and frequent trips to the casino, where he barely earned $700, Richard persisted in his fruitless attempts to double his earnings, often losing everything. I shouldered the majority of our living expenses, which made our lives increasingly challenging. Unable to bear the financial strain any longer, I reluctantly re-entered the workforce. After dropping off our son at the childcare center, I was fortunate to secure a job as a dental hygienist rather swiftly. However, upon returning home each evening, I was greeted by my mother-in-law's tirades. What time do you call this? This isn't playtime. You're a parent, yet all you do is gallivant around. Get dinner started now. In her frustration, she slammed the newspaper she was holding onto the floor, a common occurrence whenever she was upset. My mother-in-law had a volatile temperament, her mood shifting at the slightest provocation. The unpredictability of her reactions left me feeling powerless. Juggling the responsibilities of caring for my young son, working and managing household chores left me mentally and physically drained. Unable to endure it any longer, I resolved to confront Richard once again. I intercepted him early in the morning before he headed out to the casino. Listen, I've reached my breaking point. Can't you lend a hand with our child, even just a little? What? Like I said, I'm swamped. I'm gearing up to find a new job. You get that, right? Or would you prefer I stayed unemployed forever? Imagine the father of your child, Douglas. If you're not happy, just follow orders. But we're barely getting by as it is. I'm covering all our food expenses with my savings, you know. Have you any idea how costly diapers are? You claim to be earning at the casino, yet you never contribute any money. Most of our living expenses were covered by my earnings. Initially, my mother-in-law handled the utility bills, but recently she began requesting $500 per month, forcing me to dip into my savings. Even our grocery bills were eating away at my dwindling funds, leaving me with little left. All I had to rely on was money I had saved from a part-time job during my student days. Enough. How dare you talk back to me? After all, you're the one who moved into my house. Richard, typically gentle, underwent a stark transformation when money or casino matters were involved. His outburst drew my mother-in-law into the room. "What's all this now? Is your wife causing trouble again?" she interjected. "Yeah, she is. She's insisting I do housework, look after the child, and foot the living expenses. And on top of that, What audacity you have, Richard. You ought to be heading to work." "Thanks, I'll handle it from here," Richard declared loudly as he stepped outside. Mother-in-law's eyes narrowed. "You've got some nerve, burdening us with childcare and household chores while demanding money. It's disgraceful." "It's not like that. I'm not making demands. It's just that without a little assistance, life is incredibly challenging. Perhaps you're not managing it well. Are you being careless with money?" Mother-in-law seemed oblivious to the reality. She had no idea that her own son was unemployed and spending all his time at the casino. I had been instructed to stay silent, but I was at my wits' end. "Do you know that Richard isn't bringing in a single cent? He's unemployed because he quit his job." "What are you implying?" "Richard has always been outstanding. Yes, he may have stumbled with his college entrance exams, but he landed a job at a reputable company afterward. He quit that job after just a month. Now, he's always at the casino. I can't sustain us on my savings alone." "That's absurd. Stop spouting nonsense." Mother-in-law vehemently rejected my claims. Her son, who had always been a star in sports and academics, was her pride and joy. The idea that he was now unemployed and squandering his time at the casino was too much for her to accept. Her face flushed with anger, mother-in-law stormed out of the room. When she returned with deliberate steps, I was taken aback to find her wielding a knife. "What are you intending to do?" "Please put it down," I pleaded, edging away while cradling my son. Mother-in-law closed in slowly, the blade held menacingly aloft. With a chilling precision, she brought the tip of the knife to my throat. "Enough of your insults toward my son. Having a wife like you is dragging Richard down. You're a lazy leech, surviving on a measly $70,000. Leave this house." Her harsh words sent shivers down my spine. Any sudden move could endanger my son. Seeing my silence and the fear etched on my face, mother-in-law seemed satisfied and lowered the knife. "But you understand, there's no place for parasites like you. Just keep quiet and tend to your chores," she spat before retreating to her room. Relieved of the immediate threat, I crumpled to the floor, my son's sobs echoing in the tense air. I comforted him with gentle strokes on his back, but inside, a resolve solidified. We couldn't remain in this house any longer. The casual threat of a knife was unfathomable. She seemed devoid of humanity. I had been swayed by Richard's honeyed words until now. After each argument, I felt compelled to stand by him, believing he'd crumble without me. But I had reached my breaking point. Above all, my maternal instinct screamed to shield my sobbing son in my arms. This environment was no place to raise him. The decision was made. We would leave the next day. In the morning, my mother-in-law's stern voice pierced the air. "Emily, please prepare for my husband's memorial service next week. All our relatives will be attending, so ensure everything is flawless," she commanded before hurrying off to a neighbor's house, leaving no room for my response. The following week marked my father-in-law's memorial service. Richard and my mother-in-law were discussing arrangements for a lavish feast and reminiscing about him. I was tasked with all the preparations, but I found myself mentally checked out. As soon as Richard and my mother-in-law stepped out, I hastily gathered my belongings and fled from their house. I didn't have much, just my clothes, my son's toys, and diapers. When I arrived at my parents' house, they were taken aback. However, as I poured out my heart to them, my mother was moved to tears and enveloped me in a tight embrace. My typically composed father was visibly enraged and instructed me to rest. Later that evening, the phone rang. It was undoubtedly Richard, wondering why I hadn't returned to prepare dinner. I disregard the call and opt to block his number. The following day, mother-in-law and Richard arrived together at my parents' house, banging on the door in the early hours. Though my parents attempted to deter them, I insist they be allowed inside. As I swing the door open, they launch into a tirade immediately. How could you vanish without a word? What kind of wife does that? Isn't it odd to disappear without a trace? Could you please lower your voices? You're disturbing the neighbors. I respond calmly, fighting the impulse to retort, who's the actual issue here? Upon witnessing my firm stance, they attempt to seize me, but my father intervenes. If you resort to violence, we'll call the authorities. Let's discuss this calmly inside first. With my parents by my side, I initiate the conversation with mother-in-law and Richard. Why did you vanish without a word? I was at my breaking point juggling childcare and my job, feeling utterly overwhelmed. You never offered a helping hand despite my pleas. Well, I was occupied as well. Occupied at the casino, as I've mentioned before. Our son doesn't frequent the casino. Stop spreading falsehoods, mother-in-law persisted, seemingly under the impression that Richard was still employed. It's understandable, considering what a dutiful son he's always been. She likely held onto that belief. Sometimes ignorance is a blessing. So, mother-in-law, where do you think Richard is currently employed? At a securities company. I've seen the job offer letter, remember? Well then, perhaps we should give them a call to confirm if Richard is still on their staff. That would settle the matter. Hold on a moment, Richard interjected, clearly flustered. What's the issue if I'm still employed there? It shouldn't be a problem. Well, that's I hesitated, noticing Richard's visible discomfort, then dialed the securities company's number on my phone, switching the call to speaker mode. I ensured everyone could hear as I inquired about Richard's employment status. That individual resigned several years ago, if memory serves me correctly. He was with us for just about a month. The voice from the phone left mother-in-law speechless. Richard, now looking down, clenched his fists. Did you really quit? Why? I pressed. Because it was frustrating. Everything was just grunt work and the boss would yell at me for the smallest mistakes. It was harassment, Richard finally admitted. Why haven't you kept us informed about your activities since then? I've been actively searching for a job. For how long have you been on the hunt? It doesn't appear to be yielding any results. Can you provide a count of how many companies you've applied to so I can verify? Well, the job market isn't exactly overflowing with great opportunities. I'm waiting for the right fit to come along. You seem quite confident in your abilities. By the way, you're currently working part-time, correct? What was your income last month? 700. 700. Didn't you claim to mother-in-law that Emily could barely make 700 and couldn't fend for herself, so you were the sole provider? Apparently, he missiled mother-in-law, suggesting I wasn't bringing in anything, but the reality was quite different. As a dental hygienist, my salary isn't extravagant, but I was making at least $2,000. Upon learning the truth, mother-in-law flushed crimson with anger, shooting daggers at Richard. Faced with the reality, Richard erupted in fury. Why must you do this? This is all you're doing, making me appear foolish. His pride evidently wounded, he couldn't bear the humiliation, slamming his fists on the table in frustration. You shouldn't divulge such matters in public. It's defamation, I uttered in disbelief. If you wish to pursue legal action, feel free, but I'll counter with a lawsuit for your knife threat as well. And let's not forget, lawsuits come with a hefty price tag. Do you have the funds? Richard retorted, clicking his tongue in frustration. It was likely he had squandered all his earnings at the casino. Meanwhile, mother-in-law remained in shock upon discovering the truth about Richard's unemployment. I've laid it all out for her. I'm the sole earner covering all our living expenses. When Richard and I wed, he promised to manage household duties and childcare in lieu of my job. But once married, he failed to fulfill any of those obligations. That contradicts what I'd been told. Mother-in-law seemed to blindly trust whatever Richard fed her, right? She became agitated when I requested assistance with chores and childcare. She even resorted to brandishing a knife, commanding me to keep quiet and attend to my housework. I could see my mother-in-law's complexion draining. Standing before my parents, being confronted for her misconduct, she appeared uneasy. Mother-in-law, you haven't contributed a dime to the household either. We've relied solely on my income all this time. I have no intention of continuing to toil for you, so I'm requesting a divorce. Divorce? Hold on a moment. Don't just drop such bombshells out of nowhere. Yes, indeed. I'll pitch in as well, so please reconsider and return, they implored. No, thank you, I firmly reiterated, their surprise evident in widened eyes. It was likely a shock for them, accustomed to my usual compliance even amidst shouting or persistent pleas, to hear my unequivocal refusal this time. I refuse to live with someone who resorts to wielding a knife to assert dominance. I'm exhausted from sharing a roof with Richard, who spends his days gambling at the casino. I intend to seek compensation for all the labor I've contributed thus far, as well as child support. That's going to be quite a challenge. I simply can't afford such payments, mother-in-law protested. Well then, cease gambling immediately and start making payments, I countered. But I can't possibly do that. I'm unemployed. Richard's admission left me flabbergasted by his sheer lack of foresight. You're unemployed because you're too selective about the jobs you're willing to take. Do you have any idea what it means to be willing to do whatever it takes? There aren't many companies out there willing to hire someone with no significant qualifications or work experience. Don't take society for granted. Many people are out there working tirelessly in challenging conditions to make ends meet. Yet individuals who quit their jobs on a whim because they're upset or don't enjoy their work, nobody's going to be eager to hire them, he lectures, expressing doubt about Richard's ability to find employment given his current approach. I'll have my lawyer handle the divorce proceedings. Please refrain from contacting me in any way from now on. What about us? How can you be so selfish? What will become of us? Mother-in-law's anger flared at my statement. I'm not sure. Perhaps you should find a way to support yourself, I retorted, deliberately adopting a puzzled expression in response to her heated words. Heartless. I won't tolerate being called that by you. Remember when you referred to me, your daughter-in-law, as a leech surviving on a meager $700 a month? It was you who held a knife to my throat and demanded my silence. And by the way, the lazy individual earning $700 a month is sitting right beside you. Aren't you going to ask him to leave? As I spoke, mother-in-law trembled with rage. Perhaps I had pushed too far. Suddenly, she lunged forward, grabbing my collar. Stop it. I warned you. I'll call the police if you lay a hand on her. My father intervened forcefully, trying to pull her away, but she was too agitated to be restrained. So, not content with threats of a knife, now resorting to physical violence. Barbaric, wouldn't you agree it's best not to compound your offenses? I challenged mother-in-law, met with a resentful glare. Disregarding her, I turned my attention to Richard. I held on to hope that you would change, but I'm relinquishing that now. My priority is to protect our son. I won't burden you any longer. I'll handle the finances, the household chores, and childcare. Please come back. You'll handle the money? Really? Even with careful budgeting, it exceeds $1,000 a month. Can you manage that? Richard's complexion paled at my words. He had never earned more than $1,000 since quitting his job. But I have Mom's pension. So you're admitting you're relying on my pension now? Even my usually composed mother-in-law couldn't contain her frustration at Richard's absurd declaration. I don't have any other options. I'm unemployed. I've been doing some part-time work now. Richard replied defensively. Can't we attempt to resolve things? Mother-in-law interjected, hoping for reconciliation. Finally breaking his silence, my father addressed Richard sternly. Richard, you and your mother have taken undue advantage of our daughter. Had I known your true character, I would have vehemently opposed this marriage. I refuse to allow her back into your home. I'm cutting all ties with you. But I can't imagine life without Emily. Please grant me another chance, Richard pleaded desperately. Don't be ridiculous. Life without our daughter? Yet you're already relying on her. A man unwilling to strive for his own livelihood and to ensure his wife's well-being doesn't deserve our daughter. Leave at once. My father's voice carried an unusual edge, sending shivers down my spine. Richard knelt, head bowed, a pitiful sight devoid of the charm I once saw in him during our college days. Please reconsider, Emily. I'm begging you, Richard implored, his voice tinged with desperation. But my parents remained resolute. They had reached their limit. I refuse to be treated like a servant by the two of you any longer. Please refrain from involving me in anything moving forward, I asserted as we ushered them out of the house, swiftly locking the door behind them. For a while, they pounded on the door and shouted, but when a passing police officer intervened, they hastily fled. Afterward, I learned that Richard had been disowned by his mother and ejected from their home. He now resides in a dilapidated apartment, scraping by on welfare and sporadic part-time jobs. His volatile temper renders him unable to hold down any job for long, leading to a revolving door of positions at convenience stores, construction sites, and the like. Financial strain weighs heavily on him. In his efforts to meet his obligations for compensation and child support, Richard juggles multiple part-time jobs, leaving little room to pursue full-time employment. Rumors circulate that he still frequents the casino and may even be in debt. However, I pay little mind to such hearsay. News of Richard's downfall spreads rapidly among our former high school peers, prompting numerous sightings and updates. Reports of his eviction by his mother and their frequent altercations become common knowledge. His unemployment and abandonment by his wife become public gossip. Undoubtedly, his mother feels a deep sense of embarrassment after years of boasting about her son's achievements. She seldom ventures outside now. With the unwavering support of my parents in managing household duties and caring for my son, I continue to work. I now enjoy more quality time with my son, no longer needing to rely on daycare services. My parents' assistance has provided me with newfound freedom and stability. Taking care of him has made everything so much better. I only wish I had initiated the divorce sooner. Moving forward, I'm determined to cherish every moment I spend with my son and